Hello everybody, it's been a few weeks since I uploaded a video, so I wanted to go ahead and give kind of a minor update with some philosophical addendums. For the last couple weeks, most of my free time that hasn't been eaten up by work and gym and sleeping and eating and the normal things that are part of my routine have been taken up by that thing. So as some of you may know, I actually have a background in music. It's not exactly a secret, but I don't blame people who haven't gone back and watched my entire catalog because who would have the fucking time? But I actually have a degree in music. That's what I studied in college. I got a degree in it, and it was probably my main passion through high school and college. There were other passions, and at some point I decided I didn't want to devote all of my energies to music, and that is one of the reasons that I never became a professional musician. But it's always been something that I was really interested in. Now, I am not a complete and total novice on the piano, but pretty close. I did take piano lessons as a child. I think I started when I was maybe 8 or 9. I took for about 5 years from a little old lady up the street, and I did learn how to read music, so that was one thing I definitely learned. I learned how to sit and how to hold my hands, I guess. But one of the things that happened or didn't happen was that I never practiced. When I first started taking lessons, I did practice a little bit, and because it was fun and it was new. But two things happened. One, I wasn't really that interested, and I didn't understand the idea that you have to put in the time. So I just imagined, well, I want to do something cool. I want to play something that will be flashy and awesome. But I don't want to practice scales, for instance, or exercise books. And the other thing, too, is I was a little bit self-conscious about practicing. And initially, we had like a keyboard that I could practice with headphones on. It wasn't a very good keyboard. It didn't have weighted keys, and I don't even think it was full size, but it was better than nothing. And at some point, my parents bought an old used piano. I think they paid $300 for this old piano, but it was, it could be tuned and it still worked, but then you couldn't do it silently. You had to do it basically with everyone else hearing. And I don't think they would have minded, but I didn't like it. So I basically completely stopped practicing, and the lessons were very cheap. This woman, very nice old lady, and, probably did have some skills at piano and pedagogy. She'd been teaching for many, many years. But she was a little bit too nice. She would never call me out for not practicing. She did not have recitals. She said that she used to have recitals, but that they made people nervous and upset, so she stopped doing them. And I can totally understand that. I would say that, and I feel this way about a lot of things, there's lots of things that would be good for you, but you shouldn't be forced, right? There's character building things that I think would benefit most people, but forcing them can psychologically invert their utility, right? Of course, the most common, the area where I see this most and talk about it most would be something like communal showers. I think communal showers are very, very beneficial, but I don't think they should be mandated for everyone. They should be encouraged. And the same thing with learning to play an instrument or giving recitals. So basically what would happen is I would go in, and then I would basically practice in the lesson. And I did make progress doing that, but it was very, very little progress. And I didn't really care that I wasn't making good progress. In hindsight, it seems like a huge missed opportunity, because if I had really practiced for 5 years at that age, I would have probably become a fairly decent piano player. And as it turned out, maybe 3 or 4 years into my piano lessons, I started going to band. And the first year I was in band, I wasn't really into it, and I also never practiced, like literally never, never. I think I took my horn home 2 or 3 times my 6th grade year, and the teacher knew and was not happy about that. But then my 7th grade year, I started to enjoy it, and I started to realize that by putting in a little bit of effort, and in that time, think something like half an hour a week was enough to really be a lot better than your average student. Your average band student at that point in middle school wasn't practicing half an hour a week. And I think I started out doing that and then slowly started doing more, an hour a week, 2 hours a week, stuff like that. And then by high school, I was getting closer to like an hour a day. And I really progressed a lot in clarinet, and then I basically just didn't care about piano anymore. So at some point I stopped taking lessons because I clearly wasn't practicing, and I was musically focused on band, which I think, having talked to her, I think she'd had that happen a few times, that she'd had a number of students over the years who started as children playing piano, and then at some point they got into band, and their interest in continuing piano lessons was greatly curtailed. So there's almost a little bit of melancholy there, like, oh, you're getting into music finally, but not the music that I tried to teach you all these years. But regardless, then I went to college, and I had to take an entry-level piano class, and this was now many years removed from me having taken lessons, and those lessons served me well in that class, but I still had to take the class. I couldn't test out of it. I couldn't have just passed that class without practicing, and I believe that's when I actually learned how to play scales, was in that class, because I very distinctly remember never practicing. So I was given as a small child this card with numbers on it. Each of your fingers is numbered. Each digit is numbered. And so very often there are fingerings where, you play the notes, but you don't simply play the notes in a sequence. You have to use certain fingers to do it. If you've ever learned piano, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And these are spaced such that you can set them into the keyboard and then slide them up until you start on, almost always, it's going to be a C major scale, boom, boom, boom. And then you do the same pattern, but you slide it up to start on C sharp or D flat, then D, then E flat or D sharp, and all the way up. And I distinctly remember doing C and never doing any of the other ones, because C was the easiest. C is the only scale where every single key is a white key. Is there's no black keys, and so it's quote unquote easier. Not that pressing a black key is particularly difficult, but it's a slightly different feel, and you need to practice to get proficient at it. So I did do one semester, I think, in college, maybe 2 semesters, and then that was it. And then that was 18 years ago. So since then, there hasn't been any playing at all. I'm not sure that I even have touched a keyboard in that amount of time. So, and obviously the clarinet stuff, that went through college. And then when college ended, I was pretty much burned out on that. Now, I still love to listen to music and consider myself, something of a connoisseur of music, but I wasn't playing and I wasn't practicing. And that was fine. But as time has gone by, I've really thought that was something that was lacking, something I would like. I like to have skills. I like to have things that you can work towards. It's one thing why I've gravitated to something like jiu-jitsu. But I think that it's good to be well-rounded. Now, one of the reasons I didn't pursue music as fully as I could have, and that's not to imply that I would have had a glorious solo career or anything like that. That would have been very unlikely. But I could have continued to pursue it anyway. And one of the reasons I didn't is because in order to really make a go of that, unless you have some other gimmick or some crazy entrepreneurial skills, which there's plenty of people who do that, you basically have to devote yourself to the study of music and to the more or less exclusion of everything else, right? You aren't reading history, you're not learning a martial art, you're probably not going to the gym. You have to devote so much of your effort to make progress. An hour a day will keep you sharp. It won't make you better. So it's more like in college, to be an okay college player and to keep up with your college repertoire, like 2 hours a day is kind of like minimal. But of course, if you wanted to make a career of it, you wouldn't be just aiming to be, getting by in your college classes. You want to be getting better and better, and that would be 3 or 4 hours a day, just in the practice room. Never mind learning theory, learning singing, learning ancillary skills like playing the piano, for instance, or other instruments or related instruments. And, I just wasn't willing to devote that much of my energy. I'm not even sure if I could, with the fact that I had to work and everything as well. But it was always very gratifying to have a task, to really work on it. And so, for the last few months especially, I'd been thinking, like, I want to get back in this. Now, going back and playing a wind instrument was something that did not really appeal to me for a couple reasons. One, it's a lot more annoying sounding. Like practicing a wind instrument's more annoying. It's a little bit more maintenance. Now it depends if you have a keyboard or a piano, but if you have a wind instrument, like I played clarinet, you would have to have reeds, you would have to have the clarinet serviced, and it's loud, and there's no way to do it that's not quiet, so there's no headphones for clarinet, for instance. I could just see it annoying the neighbors, especially clarinet, because it can play so high and it can pierce with so much high-pitched noise. But the main problem, well, then there's another problem, the repertoire. So if you look at the repertoire, that's not the same for every instrument. All right. So if you play tuba, I'm sorry, but there's just not a lot. There's some good tuba pieces for sure, but not very many. Right? Mozart didn't write for tuba. Beethoven didn't write for tuba. Bach didn't write for tuba. There's arrangements, of course, so tuba, euphonium. Certain instruments there's more. Clarinet, it's pretty good. There's a lot of really good clarinet stuff. It's been around a couple hundred years. Like there is some very high quality clarinet stuff, and probably more than you're ever gonna really be able to play, but not an insurmountable amount either. And the other thing is, but piano has the most. Piano is by far the most. I mean, violin has a lot as well, but piano is the king. They call it the king of instruments for a reason. There's contemporary stuff, you can do old stuff, you can do all kinds of arrangements of different things. And so your repertoire opportunities are for every level, whether they're talking about beginner, intermediate, advanced, is everywhere. But the other thing is, and this is crucial, with a wind instrument, you basically should be in some kind of ensemble. You should be in a band or an orchestra or a quintet or a quartet or something. You can't do a clarinet solo without an accompaniment. Now, there's programs and stuff these days. You can have recordings. You can find a piano player, but even then, you need a piano player. You probably should join a band, and that just makes things way more complicated. But with piano, you can just be on your own pretty much as you need. You don't need to find time to rehearse with other people. You can rehearse on your own at any time. It was, and also, I'll be honest, I was a little bit burned out by clarinet, and I was also cognizant of, I think I really could have gotten a lot better at piano. Now, I don't mean that I'm going to be performing in Carnegie Hall. That's never going to happen. But I could definitely get a lot better than I am. Be a good player, a good amateur player. Let's just say that. So, now what does this have to do with the topics of this channel? So there's a couple things. Not that, it's my channel. I can make videos about anything that I want. They don't have to be on topic. Not to have to say that, but I think it's important for people to really have things that they focus on for self-improvement, right? And this could be all kinds of things. Obviously, I have the things that I'm personally into, but these don't have to be the things that you're into. You could go get into dance. You could get into cooking. You could get into some other type of martial art, boating, sailing, fishing, hunting, crochet, sewing. There's so many skills that you can spend time on. Basically, anything that gives you a hobby that you can obtain skill and expressive abilities, but also that keeps you off of the television. Because one of the worst things you can do is just spend your time passively watching stuff, except for my videos, obviously. Spending time passively watching my videos is great. You should definitely do more of that. But otherwise, it really is a wasted opportunity. And when people talk about the time investment for learning an instrument, an hour a day, 2 hours a day, oh my gosh, I could never do that. But the average person is, let's face it, watching 4 to 6 hours of television every day. So in that amount of time, there's very few skills that you couldn't learn at a fairly accelerated rate, right? 1 hour a day is going to give you a lot of progress, especially as a beginner. 2 or 3 hours a day is going to give you enough that in a few years you could be something of a serious player. Or whatever the other skill might be, whether it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, rugby, soccer. I think ideally, if you could do it where it was social with other people, that's fine. But one of the things about music is that it can be social, right? You can have an audience, you can integrate into a group or a band. You can start accompanying people for fun or for pay, right? So I think that it's much more engaging and worthwhile living to have that. Now, I like to be balanced, so I like the martial arts stuff, I like the jiu-jitsu stuff, and I like to mix it with a musical thing, something that's a little bit more artistic and arcane. And just to get a broader representation. And this was one of my problems with music school, was that it really discouraged that, and it didn't explicitly come and say you shouldn't know other things, you shouldn't care about other topics, but it was like this should be your number one focus, and everything else should be ancillary and discriminated against. And if you knew, like, the professors there, they really were it was kind of sad to the degree to which not all, but most of them were, unidimensional beings. Now, they were impressive in that one dimension. Think of a pro athlete. They might be phenomenal at that sport, and that's worthy of praise, in its way, but they also are truncated in other parts of their lives, right? And no amount of high pay in those cases can, cover the fact that they're uncultured, that they're illiterate in some cases, right? That they don't know anything about anything, with some exceptions. I just decided I really wanted to do this. Like I said, I feel like I'm very much a beginner, but it's kind of debatable to what extent, because I did have a lot of that previous training. It was pretty interesting to sit down and do I remember the fingerings to play a scale, and I did it, and I think I was like, okay, I think that's right. And I bought a whole bunch of etude books and study books, and I double checked to make sure that I wasn't misremembering. And in fact, I was remembering it right. It just felt right. If you had asked me, I couldn't have told you, but the way that it felt on the hands. So there is it's interesting even after all that time that there is some training. And I don't know if it's from when I took lessons when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, or if it was when I took the college class in 2003. It doesn't really matter, I suppose. Maybe a bit of both. But, so I bought, for the case of piano, and I keep saying piano, and purists, obviously, that is not a piano. That is a keyboard. Now, there are good reasons to pick a keyboard. Far cheaper, far easier to move around. That thing weighs 25 pounds. The smallest piano you're going to find is going to weigh hundreds of pounds. And sometimes you can push them around, but getting them delivered, moving them around, very difficult. And the other thing, pianos do need to be tuned. You need to take, not that I wouldn't take care of my keyboard, but it doesn't need to be tuned. It's going to be just fine. Now, keyboards also range tremendously in their quality. I wanted a keyboard that felt like a piano. So one thing, if you've ever played many keyboards that are cheap, they have plastic keys that are not weighted, so they're very easy to press. And if that's all you want to do, then that is okay. But I wanted something that will feel like a piano, so that when I have opportunities to play pianos, my fingers have been trained to play pianos, not to play much easier to press keyboards. The other thing is a lot of keyboards don't have the full range. So that's a full 88. That's a Yamaha P125, which I did my research, and it's the most popular keyboard out there, with good reason. There are better ones. You can get stuff that's it's basically a copy or a digital copy of their grand piano. They took one of their highest selling, most popular grand pianos, something that probably would have cost tens of thousands of dollars to buy, and just recorded every note on it. And you can hear that. You can hear, when you play the higher keys, the resonance throughout the rest of the piano, even though there's no piano there. So the keys are weighted and they're differential, so you can, if you're accenting them, you can hear that. It's really good for hearing your mistakes. I've read that these are not the closest to real pianos. They're very close, but not the closest. There are keyboards that are a lot more expensive that are closer, and maybe one day I'll upgrade to one of those. One thing I'll say that was frustrating about this, though, it was out of stock, so I had to wait. I ordered it. It took maybe 3 or 4 weeks to arrive. The other thing is, it didn't come in one piece. So the case, like the stand is separate, not the stand, but the platform it's on is separate. The pedals are separate, and the bench was separate. And I didn't see anywhere on Amazon where they sold it in bundles. Although it wouldn't surprise me if you went to like an actual like keyboard store that they might do that for you. So when I ordered it, I ordered the stand, the pedals, and the bench and the keyboard all at the same time, and everything but the keyboard came within like 3 days. So for about a week or maybe 2 weeks, I had no keyboard but everything else just sitting there, which was really, really a huge tease. But eventually the keyboard came. It sounds really good. I do really like it. It feels good. And I bought, of course I went online and typed up what are the best, books. So some of you have probably seen, if you're keyboard people, I've got the Hanon. I had that as a kid, but I did not ever practice it. By the time I got to the Hanon, I was to the phase where I never practiced anymore. So, I'm doing the Hanon, and I'm going to do that. I just was reading the other day. I was doing research, not research, but reading about Hans Liszt, and they talked about how people would play that in every key. So I'm going to, it's only written in one key as far as I can tell, but I'm going to do every exercise in every key. Those are literally exercises for your fingers, but they're kind of fun to play and they sound cool. So I'm doing that. I'm doing scales. I can already play all the major scales, one octave, both hands, pretty reliably, but I'm trying to really get the finger movements to be as efficient and correct as possible. Having big hands is a blessing and a curse. It means I can go more than, well, I think an octave and a third, maybe more. But it does mean that if I press the key, it's very hard to press the keys between the black keys. If I'm pressing a white key, to the point where it's between a black key, which sometimes feels a lot easier, it won't actually fit, and my finger will press both. So I'm working on getting the placing right. And then I also have, I'd always read that Bartók had written a lot of good stuff for kids. So I have his, is it Mikromosk? I can remember it wrong, but I have 2 of his progressive books that basically start very easy and they slowly get more difficult. So I'm just working through those piece by piece as I go through the exercises and the scales, and just doing it at the pace of practicing it until you get it right and get it really good, and then do the next thing. And there's no rush to get to the next thing. It's one thing I didn't like about college is you would have a lesson every week, and then you'd move on, and it'd be like, well, I barely got this, and I was rushed to get there. I want to take my time, so I'm doing about an hour a day, pretty consistently. Sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less. I have neighbors upstairs, so I'll use the headphones if it's late at night, and it's just right there and go, 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 go. And I think there's music is fascinating, and when I learned clarinet, it's one of those things where when you learn, it seems mystical. People who aren't musically trained, it seems like everyone who can play a song is like a gifted, talented, amazing person. At least that's the impression I get from a lot of people, But when you learn, you realize so much of it is technique and skill, and the artistry element is kind of minimal. It's like the frosting on the cake, even less. And people just assume that you just learn. But it's practice. I listened to a bluegrass group called Sleepy Sleepy Man, and it's a group of 3 brothers from New Jersey, and they'd kind of gotten famous because they uploaded a video when they were all pretty young, and the youngest player was maybe 8 playing the banjo. And he's a good banjo player at 8, and people thought, oh, he's a prodigy. And they have a video where they talk about, well, he started when he was 6, and he wasn't very good at 6. Like if you'd heard him at 6 or 7, it was not very good, but he practiced. He practiced a decent amount. And so by the time he was 8, 2 years in, he could actually play stuff and impress quote unquote normies. So the beginning of that Hanon, by the way, says that there's so many good. By the way, I believe the Hanon was written in the 1800s, probably like in the 1850s or 60s, because he died in the 1870s or 80s. But he said there's so many good piano players that people who aren't very good won't be tolerated, and that you won't be able to play a moderately difficult piece in public until after 8 or 10 years of practice. Now, I think that is overestimating the ability of most people to critique something, but I think if you give half an hour to an hour a day, I do think that in about 2 years you're going to impress normal people. That doesn't mean that you're ready to start a career or premiere on Carnegie Hall or anything like that, or that you're going to play the hardest pieces in the world. That's not true. But you'll be able to play stuff that will be enjoyable to you and enjoyable to most people. And that's if you do that amount. If you do twice that amount, if you practice 2 hours a day, or you do it for 4 years or whatever, you start multiplying that, and it becomes something that, and it becomes very doable. But there is a delayed gratification. It does take time, and you have to go through this period where what you're playing is not beautiful or amazing, right? You're playing scales, you're playing exercises, you're playing much easier pieces, and people are not going to listen to that and go like, oh my God, that was amazing, wow, I'm going to clap. And that was my problem as a child, was like this stuff is silly and it's boring, and I'm not going to get popular at a party because I can play a really simplified version of Greensleeves, or of course maybe a party of like 4-year-olds, maybe you could, but so you just have to realize that it takes time and effort, and I'm not going to do any online classes, at least for now. That's something that's the big revolution that's happened since I started. And in many ways, I wonder if that isn't the biggest revolution that's happened in pedagogy like ever. Right? I'm still using etude books that were written 200 years ago or more. But now in the last 10 years, suddenly you can get apps that will help you. I'm going to go with the traditional method, but part of the thing is it should be played. So I am probably going to upload videos of me playing, kind of like progress videos of that. And the first ones are not going to be good. The stuff isn't going to be hard, and no one's going to watch them and be like, wow, you're a great piano player, keyboard player. But it is something that I think it is necessary to share with people. It's also good to get advice. There's a lot of people out there who, can give good advice and bad advice. You have to filter that stuff out. But yeah, so you can see like the bottom shelf there is now all piano books. I found all my old ones, some of which I think are too simple. They're assuming you don't know how to read music, and that's probably some of my biggest. One of the things I've come across looking up books is a lot of books deal with assuming you don't know how to read music. You can't read the staff, and I can hold rhythm, and I know pitch. So like I know when I'm messing up or not doing it right, but which is probably an enormous advantage. But I'm still starting basically at the beginning. So I guess it's a restart. Be like if you'd worked out at the gym and you hadn't worked out in 20 years, like you don't go in and start doing your personal best. You start right back at just the bar and work your way up. It's probably not that dissimilar from that, actually. So anyway, that's what's been taking up a lot of my time, a lot of my free time. I only have a couple hours usually to play with per day, and that's filling up. And, since I've had the piano, I haven't watched the TV once. And I wasn't watching it much before, but, in terms of like your cognitive ability and your happiness and everything else, just having something, and again, it doesn't have to be keyboard, it doesn't have to be music, right? You could crochet, you could fucking play board games, I don't know. But stuff that develops a skill, whether it's a useful skill or not, start whittling, sewing, making pants, making soap, who knows, right? Like 3D printing, Bitcoin mining, whatever it is. I think that's a good way to use your recreation, to develop yourself, because then you're not just relaxing and not doing anything, you're developing yourself. And that's that's useful, but it's also a really enjoyable process and something that I would encourage people to look into. So if you've always thought, well, I can't do it, I don't know anything, you just start at the beginning, and that's how you learn. You have to humble yourself to realize, yeah, of course you're not going to know anything at the start, but through diligence and persistence and effort, you can achieve quite a lot. I won't say the cliche and say you can achieve anything. That would be, I mean, amazing if that was true. I don't think that's true, but it doesn't need to be true for it to be, you know, you can't achieve everything, but you can achieve an awful lot. So why not? Why not do it? So obviously there'll be content like the normal content as well, but just expect to start seeing some of these updated keyboard videos. Piano. I like to say piano. Fuck keyboard. Keyboard is a copy of a piano, so I'm gonna say piano. But like, yes, I know it's a keyboard, not exactly the same, but yeah, and I would encourage anyone who's thought about this, stop thinking about it and do it. Right? I've talked to people many times who, for instance, oh, I want to lose weight, and for 5 years they say I want to lose weight, and they never did it. And it's like, you could have done that at any point, so do it now, right? And if you haven't done it so far, then just use that as a reason to stop procrastinating and, you know, start doing it. I think so. The piano, the bench, the pedals, the case, everything all together was about $1,000 total. Probably could have found cheaper if I looked around or got a slightly, you know, not as good model. I maybe spent another 50 or 60 bucks on books. They're pretty cheap. Most of the best ones are not copyrighted anymore. Hanon's not copyrighted. So a lot of that stuff can be printed for free, and you can just find tons of it, you know, laying around. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. Got any questions, concerns, any tips, if you're a piano player, if you're a keyboard player and you know what you're talking about, you know, if you want to give any tips on things that I could look at, things that you suggest, I'll definitely be open to that, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.